Lesson 1: Sustainable Development. Did you know that each year 6 million hectares of productive dry land is transformed into deserts? Also, more than 11 million hectares of forest are destroyed every year, and these, over 30 years, would be as large as India. The publication of Our Common Future, and also called as the Brundtland Commission Report, provided a comprehensive definition of sustainable development. Sustainable development is the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It contains within two key concepts: the concept of needs, in particular, the essential needs of the world's poor to which overriding priority should be given, and the idea of limitations imposed by the state of technology and social organization on the environment's ability to meet present and future needs. Thus, goals of economic and social development must be aligned with sustainability in all countries.
Stability versus sustainability. The term stability is used by scientists in various fields of science. In general, stability means the ability of the system to keep it in the given parameters, and it is characterized by three aspects. The first one is inertia or persistence, the ability of a system to resist being disturbed or altered. Number 2, constancy, the ability of a system to maintain a certain size or state. And number 3, resilience, the ability of a system to recover after disturbance. The concept of sustainable development does imply limits, not absolute limits, but limitations imposed by the present state of technology and social organizations on environmental resources and by the ability of biosphere to absorb the effects of human activities. Sustainable development requires meeting the basic needs of all and extending to all opportunity to fulfill their aspirations for a better life. At a minimum, sustainable development must not endanger the natural systems that support life on Earth: the atmosphere, water, soils, and the living beings. The Earth is one, but the world is not. We all depend on one biosphere for sustaining our lives. Yet each community, each country, strives for survival and prosperity with little regard for its impact on others. Without environmental sustainability, it is impossible to attain economic, social, cultural, and political stability.
Models of Global Sustainable Development. According to Brundtland and Khalid on 1987, the pursuit of sustainable development requires a political system that secures effective citizen participation in decision making, an economic system that is able to generate surpluses and technical knowledge, on a self-reliant and sustained basis, a social system that provides for solutions for the tensions arising from disharmonious development, a production system that respects the obligation to preserve the ecological base for development, a technological system that can search continuously for new solutions, an international system that fosters sustainable patterns for trade and finance, and an administrative system that is flexible and has the capacity for self-correction. These requirements are more in the nature of goals that should underlie national and international action and development. But the sincerity with which these goals are pursued and the effectiveness with which departure from they are corrected is what really matters. On economic sustainable development, in most industrialized countries, production, which is highly subsidized, is the number one driver to economic development. But with increasing production, water and air pollution, overuse of chemicals, and soil erosion are inevitable. According to Drexage and Murphy on 2010, sustainable development is expected to encompass the three pillars of economic development: social equity and environmental protection. Economic development is not sustainable though if it increases vulnerability to crisis. A drop in prices may cause farmers or other producers to overexploit natural resources to maintain incomes. However, with an appropriate technology, vulnerability can be reduced. Moreover, economic and social development can and should be mutually reinforcing. Economic developments can accelerate social development by providing opportunities for underprivileged groups or spreading education more rapidly. Other variables in the equation of sustainable development include education, health, and social justice. Disadvantaged groups and deserted nomads must have also the assurance of survival by having the fair share of the Earth's resources. In essence, sustainable development ensures that there will be no exploitation of natural resources.
So now let us proceed to the Sustainable Development Goals. So since the Millennium Development Goals launched in 2000 intended to make global progress in poverty, education, health, hunger, and the environment expired, the UN member states are finalizing the Sustainable Development Goals to replace it. In addition, it outlines 17 steps to attain sustainable development from 2015 to 2030, and these are the following. So the first step is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Next is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. Third is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Fourth is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Next is to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. So the next one is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Seventh is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Next is to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth full of productive and employment and decent work for all. Ninth is to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. 10th is to reduce inequality within and among countries. Next is to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Next is to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. 13th is to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Next is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Next is to protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. Sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Next is to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. And lastly is to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So these are the new sets of global goals and targets that will serve as basis for the United Nations member states in framing their agenda and political policies in the next 15 years. So now we are down to our trivia. Commitment to sustainable development. The interlinkages among environmental management, poverty alleviation, and sustainable development have long been recognized by governments and international institutions. So these are the conferences and initiatives. First is the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment at the Stockholm in the year 1972. Next is the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development at the Rio de Janeiro in the year 1992. World Conference on Human Rights at the Vienna in the year 1993. And so much more. So now let's proceed to the reports and statements. So we have here the World Conservation Strategy at the IUCN et al. In the year 1980. Next is the Our Common Future by WCED in the year 1987. And so much more.
Lesson 2. Global Food Security. Did you know that 1 of 7 people in the world is living on less than $1 a day, and more than 800 million people claim they have inadequate food at eat. Global food security, which is the ability for all people to have basic physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food at all times. On a global scale, statistics shows that infant mortality is failing. Life expectancy continues to rise. Literacy among the world's adults increases, and more children have access to education than ever before. However, despite advancement in science and technology, global food production continues to lag behind population growth, leading to increased levels of hunger worldwide. The Sustainable Development Goals include a goal to eliminate hunger and achieve food security through sustainable agriculture by cutting by half the proportion of people who suffer from hunger by 2015. The concept of global food security includes four considerations: availability, access, utilization, and stability. One of the greatest challenges the world is facing now is how to ensure that a growing global population projected to rise to around 10 billion by 2015 has enough food to meet their nutritional needs to feed another 2 billion people in 2050. Food production will need to increase by 50% globally.
Models of global food security. The prevailing model of food security revolves mainly around the idea that growing more food is at the heart of solution to global hunger and malnourishment. To grow more food, developing countries need to raise farm productivity, mainly through the adoption of improved technologies such as biotechnology and better development infrastructure. Another approach to global food security is the heavy emphasis or export-oriented agriculture. Here, the market is seen as being able to meet the food security needs of all, rather than those who have the greatest purchasing power. Industrial agriculture continues to be emphasized despite ecological devastation caused by input-intensive practices popularized by the Green Revolution. The right to food movement, for one, directly challenges the commodification of food and calls upon governments to illegalize the individual's right to food as fundamental human right. In 1999, the Committee of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, or CESCR, emphasized that the right to adequate food is realized when every man, woman, and child, alone or in community with others, has the physical and economic access at all times to adequate food or means of its procurement. Food sovereignty also embraces a right-based approach to food, although it has a much broader focus than the one taken up the right to food movement, and is far more critical of the emphasis on market-based solutions to hunger and malnourishment. It refers to the right of people to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through socially just and ecologically sensitive methods to participate in decision-making and define their own food, agriculture, and livestock and fishery system. The International Assessment of Agricultural Knowledge, Science and Technology for Development, or IAASTD, support his claim in a report published in 2008. For example, the report highlights the multifunctional role of agriculture, whereby it not only provides food, feed, fiber, fuel, and other goods, but also produces and contributes to several critical social, economic, cultural, and ecological ends. This includes the provision of services such as mitigating climate change, regulating water, controlling erosion, and support services such as soil formation, providing habitats of wildlife, as well as contributions to cultural activities such as use and preservation of landscapes and spiritual sites are some of the positive functions. Food security is a complex condition requiring holistic approach to all forms of malnutrition. The productivity and income of small-scale food producers, resilience of food production systems, and sustainable use of biodiversity and genetic resources. Brundtland Commission Report, 1987.
Criticism to the existing models of global food security. There are several criticisms to the existing models of food security. First, there is the disregard for power relation characterizing food system. For example, growth in the world cereal production has steadily outstripped world population growth, yet each year there are more people in the world who do not get enough food. Global agriculture has the potential to grow enough food for all, but food is often not available where it is needed. Second, there is an emphasis on a trade-based approach to resolving hunger. Based on industrial agriculture, it has seen these groups that are poorest and most vulnerable to hunger and malnourishment, smallholder farmers, and marginalized communities around the world most adversely affected. Third, food security approach does not sufficiently consider the wider social and political context within which its objectives of eliminating hunger and malnourishment are pursued. It fails to tackle questions about relations of power that characterize decisions about how food security should be attained. For example, many developing countries, on the other hand, have suffered the opposite problems. Farmers are not sufficiently supported. In some, improved technology allied to price to initiatives in government service has produced a major breakthrough in food production. But elsewhere, the food-growing small farmers have been neglected, coping with often inadequate technology and few economic initiatives. Many are pushed to marginal land, too dry, too steep, lacking in nutrients. Forests are cleaned and product dry land rendered barren. Proponents of food sovereignty view the existing global food system as altogether unsuitable to meet the food security needs of global hunger and malnourished, and certainly not capable of meeting the challenges of global environment change to food system in ecologically sustainable manner. In rejecting the market-centric capitalist food regime and inherently and develop unjust and biased, food sovereignty calls for an entirely new model based on rights of local communities to control air on foods and system. This involves the democratization of national food policy, localized food supply chains, re-regulating the food commodity market in a way where setting fair price for both farmers and consumers becomes impossible. Greater public investment in agriculture, genuine fair reform to provide greater access to lands and tenure security to small and marginalized farmers, and prioritization of agri-ecological approaches, amongst other things.
Challenges of global food security. Food security is complex, multidimensional, and multisectoral, and one being compounded by the impacts of climate change. Many developing countries are agricultural and need effective support mechanisms to promote increased production. This means that small farmers play a significant role in attaining food security in the world. Moreover, there may be enough food produced, but if there is no equal distribution due to disparity in purchasing power, food security will still be the problem. The pace and pattern of economic development must generate sustainable work opportunities on this scale and at a level of productivity that would enable poor households to meet minimum consumption standards. More food is required not merely to feed more people but to address undernourishment. However, increased food production shall not be based on ecologically unsound production policies and compromise long-term prospects for food security. Pressure on resources increase when people lack alternatives. Thus, development policies must widen people's options for earning a sustainable livelihood, particularly for resource-poor households and in areas under ecological stress. The conversion of agricultural sources is an urgent task because in many parts of the world, cultivation has already been extended to marginal lands, and fishery and forestry resources have been exploited. Land use in agriculture and forestry must be based on a scientific assessment of land capacity and the annual depletion of topsoil, fish stock, or forest resources must not exceed the rate of regeneration.
The pressure on agricultural land from crops and livestock production can be partly relieved by increasing productivity. But short-sighted, short-term improvements in productivity can create different forms of ecological stress, such as the loss of genetic diversity in standing crops, salinization and alkalization of irrigated lands, nitrate pollution of groundwater, and pesticides residues in food. Future productivity growth in both developed and developing nations should be based on the better controlled applications of water and agrochemicals, as well as on more extensive use of organic manures and non-chemical means of pest control. In the case of fisheries and tropical forestry, we rely largely on the exploitation of the naturally available stocks. Hence, it will be necessary to turn to methods that produce more fish, fuel wood, and forest products under controlled conditions.